CM 365, all about Carnatic music. Whether Lakshya or Lakshana is more important in music is indeed a ever debatable subject, I would say. And till today, we really have not found any concrete answer to that. Also, the question arises as to whether Lakshya should follow Lakshana or Lakshana should follow Lakshya. So, for this also, actually, there is absolutely no answer. Some feel that Lakshana is something prescribed by non-performing theoreticians, and this Lakshana actually constrains creativity. According to some people, this is the opinion. So does this really actually mean that Lakshana, as far as music is concerned, is a redundant proposition then? I would say that Lakshana actually describes the goal, and Lakshya helps us to achieve this particular goal. Now let us take a small example. If we were asked to go for a running race, usually we are given a particular destination which we have to reach. Now when you reach the destination, you know that you have achieved your goal. Suppose somebody tells you to run and says that, well, you just keep running, and they don't prescribe any destination for you. I suppose the whole running process itself becomes some kind of a meaningless thing. And similarly here also I feel that the Lakshya without the Lakshana actually has got no meaning, because without any boundaries or grammar, the whole system itself will lose its beauty. And here we see that actually the Lakshya rarely evades Lakshana, that is the other end. We see that the Lakshya rarely evades the Lakshana, but only modifies or enlarges it to make it more accommodative and creative. So one side we see that the rules or the Lakshana are important for us to form the Lakshya, but then the Lakshya on the other end, what it does is to actually elaborate on this Lakshana and make it sound more aesthetic and beautiful. Lakshana, for example, provides a minimum definition of raga, enough to preserve its identity and individuality, but Lakshana adds further beauty. Now let us look at a few examples to see how Lakshana based rules departed in practice. This is a very interesting study for you, where we see that some things have been codified by Lakshana, but then at some point of time the Lakshya took over and it created actually new paths for the whole Lakshana itself. For example, for a very long time it was believed that a minimum of 5 notes are required to form a ragam, and at least 5, 6, 7 of course is the other end. But anything which is below the 5 notes cannot form a scale actually. That's what the earlier theory was. But then Dr. Balamurali Krishna broke this theory and he created ragams with 4 notes. He created ragam with 3 notes. The 4 note ragams like Mahati, Lavangi, Siddhi, Sumukam, etc. And furthermore, just with 3 notes, he created ragams like Sarvashri, Omkari, Ganapati, etc. So we see that this theory actually was proved wrong. And one of the examples where we could say that the Lakshya took over the Lakshana and created new norms. Another example I could give here is that we generally say that as far as Carnatic music is concerned, 2 varieties of the same note earlier. Now, of course, lot of Bhashanga ragams from the Hindustani domain have come into our system and we have also absorbed it. But at one point of time, it was said that 2 varieties of the same note should not be sung in succession. That is, sa, ri, ri, like that. We cannot sing it that way. So, to actually, here we see that the 72 melas that we are talking about, the Melakarta system, violates this rule by giving dual nomenclature and avoids the impression of formal violation. And of course, another example we could give is that generally we always for a long time from the historical point of view, we see that it has been a Lakshana based theory that a ragam should have at least, it can have ma and pa, but if one has to be omitted, then the ragam should have at least the pa or the ma, and no ragam can be existent in form without both the ma and pa. But Muttaya Bhagavatar actually broke this norm and he created what we call as the Niroshta ragas, where you see that both Pa and Ma have been absent. Then we also see that in the Janya ragas, generally we see that the Janya raga should follow the notes, variety of notes as taken by the Janaka ragam. But in this category also we see how a lot of Bhashanga ragas have creeped in, that is ragas which make use of the Anya Swaras. And these Anya Swaras are becoming very, very important in terms of adding aesthetics to the ragam. For example, Ananda Bhairavi, all this we see that where the Anya Bhashanga Swara actually enhances the beauty of the ragam. Then we also see that sometimes the Arona dictates something, but the composition actually has got a different kind of a Lakshana which comes into its fold. For example, in Ananda Bhairavi, we see that Sagari Gama Padapasa is the Arona that we are talking about. Generally, that is the Arona of Ananda Bhairavi. But the Geetam, Kamala Sulochana, begins on Nida Nisa, which is actually, I would say, against the norm of the Arona itself. Then also we see that the Arohana, generally, of course, Tyagarajar was a master in creating something out of the box. But generally a ragam, if the Arona has to start on the Adara Shadja and move on to the Tara Shadja. But he created unique ragas like Chittaranjani and Nada Tarangini ragams, where you see that Nada Tarangini in fact is a very unique ragam which has got the Arona like Sa Pa Ma Ri Ga Ri Sa. So where the Aronam starts on the Adara Shadja and ends on the Adara Shadja. This is something very, very unique that he created. Now we also have another unique aspect created by Dr. Balamurali Krishna in the domain of Thalam, where generally we see that when we talk about Gati Bedam, if we take a Adi Thalam for example, the Gati Bedam implies or applies to every beat or every anga of that particular Thalam. For example, if you take a Lagu, if there are in the Adi Thalam is 1 Lagu plus 2 Dhrutam, so every beat of the Thalam will employ the Gati. But he created something called the Mukhi Thala, where in this the Gati Bedam is done only on the Shashabda Kriya, that is the Kriyas which are heard, and the Nishabda Kriya remains in the Chatushra Gati. So this is again innovation that he did against the usual normal Lakshana that is dictated in the theory of music. Like this we see that even in the domain of Kacheri, we have the traditional what we call as the pattern of starting with the Varnam, then the usual we have the sub-main item, main item, then the Tukada pieces and ending in the Mangalam, and before that Tillana and so on. But we have also heard of musicians who broke this norm and where they started off with a Tillana, or some other musician who took the Varnam as the main piece and elaborated. So these are all some kinds of experimentation that are done against the Lakshana aspects which are dictated in our music. But nevertheless we see that as far as Lakshya and Lakshana are concerned, here the Lakshana actually gives some kind of a framework, and the Lakshya is which adds beauty to the framework. So that way we could say that the Lakshya and Lakshana go hand in hand and are complementary to each other. And so we cannot even say which is superior to the other or which comes first and which comes next. Finally, I would like to wind up by saying that the Lakshana actually is like a beautiful circle, and the Lakshya actually are the immense possibilities that are tried out within this circle. In fact, the beauty of a Carnatic music is itself the fact that the circle formed by the Lakshana gives immense and innumerable possibilities for the Lakshya to operate, and that is where our music is very, very great, where we are definitely bound by rules, but within the rules we are able to create so much, and the sky is the limit as far as the creativity is concerned. But then finally we see that all this creativity has got some kind of a framework, and that is why it makes Carnatic music such a great music system. CM 365, all about Carnatic music.